Ah, August. Pennant races heating up. Sundays at the pool, listening to the ball game on the radio. Leisurely reading the box scores. Ah, August. Are you kidding? August means studying, researching, and compiling all the data for my fantasy football draft that's less than a month away. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week, as I just started the program, so I'm going to probably do a little bit more research on the man Bobby Bowden who just passed. I did spend some time researching another, I tell you, he would have been another Bob Gibson. Maybe really another Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan type of pitcher, and that is J.R. Richard, who just passed this week at the age of 71. And of course, he is a tragic figure in the world of baseball because he was on the top of his game. You know, I just can't believe it's over 40 years ago, and that's not laughing. It's just showing my age now. But 1980, he took the mound as the starting pitcher in the All-Star game for the National League. And who would know that that would probably be his last national appearance, especially on television, because later on he would develop, I believe it was a blood clot in his arm, shoulder. I do believe he suffered from a stroke, but nonetheless, his career was done. And he was just getting started, all at the age of 30. So I'd like to talk about his career. I even have, I want, obviously everyone knows who follows Park Ridge Sports History, knows that each week I always bring baseball cards. I think it's great nostalgia, but it's better than actual newspaper photos, because I think that as campy as they are sometimes, the pictures, I think they are a real piece of nostalgia, baseball history, and also a real appeal to many of the baseball fans who really get a charge out of it. It's a return to childhood for at least 40 minutes each week. This one, though, I picked, and it was J.R. Richards, Kellogg's baseball card. Remember, I do have, I would say I do have a bias towards the Kellogg's baseball cards. Anybody who collects them knows that I think they have probably more value than some of the Topps baseball cards, simply because there weren't as many. Remember, it's amazing to me. I think each set when I was growing up had maybe 75 cards in each series, but I can't begin to tell you how few of the baseball cards I got. And if I did, how is this possible? I would get doubles of the 3D cards. I never got a sniff of this J.R. Reed card. And as a matter of fact, I never got the real big stars. I remember getting maybe Cito Gaston. Who would know he would go on to lead the Blue Jays to 2 World Series titles. At the time, he was an outfielder for the San Diego Padres. Had a couple of seasons where he hit 20 or more home runs, but he was one of the stars along with Nate Colbert on those early terrible Padres teams. But nevertheless, I wanted to devote some time to J.R. Richard. And then I'm going to tell you this. This is where baseball is far different from other sports. And I guess it's because it's the day-to-day regime that the sport really is all about. And that is, you have your highs, you have your lows, but it's just like a regular day at work for most Americans. And that is that baseball is played basically every day during the summer, or actually for 6 months of the season. Plus then you get the playoffs. And if you count in with the baseball players, I mean, who start spring training in the middle of February, you're talking about they're playing baseball games from probably the beginning of March. And if you're a winning team, all the way now to November. So you're basically playing 6 to 7, maybe even 8 months of the year, just nothing but baseball. And it's a daily grind. And I think even though that adds to the lure and luster and the beauty of the sport, it also gives it an advantage. And sometimes, you know what, maybe because there are so many games, certain games do lose maybe their luster as opposed to, let's say, great football games played once a week on an NFL that people remember or recall, or NCAA tournament basketball games, etc., which are only played on the weekends during March. And basketball, of course, is really, and hockey, kind of like an every other night sport. And remember, they didn't used to go as long as they do now. Nevertheless, what I love about baseball is, and I was with my son, Matty, we were having breakfast the other day. We just decided to go out to breakfast, and we get the newspaper. And in the newspaper, of course, what do I see as I pull this behind? This day in baseball history. And of course, I have highlighted some of the guys I'm going to talk about today. It's amazing because on this day in history, and this is Wednesday, August 4th, I couldn't believe the number of Hall of Famers that were involved in baseball history. And I'm going to start with A-Rod. Not only does he hit his 500th home run on August 4th, but he also hit his 600th home run on August 4th. That's bizarre. Rod Carew joined the 3,000 hit club in 1985, being a member of the California Angels on that date, August 4th. Tom Seaver won his 300th game. People don't remember this, but he won it with the White Sox. And who did he defeat? The New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium. And then you have knuckleballer Phil Niekro, who set a modern Major League Baseball record with 4 wild pitches in 1 inning. It was the 5th inning, and he had 6 in 1 game. And the Braves lost the game to the Houston Astros 6-2. And of course, here's and 1963. These are all Hall of Famers, all in the same day. Mickey Mantle batting for the first time in 2 months after breaking his left foot. This is 63. So all my Mantle fans out there will probably recall this better than I am reading it. He hit a pinch hit home run for the Yankees as they beat the Orioles 11-10 for a split of a doubleheader in 1963, also occurring again on August 4th. And then you have a guy who I was really amazed at, and it's Vic Rasky. And Rasky only had a WAR, and you guys know any of the people who follow this, we've been talking about WAR. I've been trying to address it, trying to help explain it as I try to understand it more fully. But I'm always amazed about, let's say, the bizarre results of the WAR. And I was looking at Vic Rasky's record. Now, he had 5 good seasons with the Yankees, or 6 good seasons with the Yankees. The amazing thing is, I'm going to ask my callers out there. I'm going to get right to this. And I always forget this. Here's JR. We're going to come back to him in a second. Here's his other 3D card. All right. And of course, these are some of the players that I mentioned. I'm going to leave one guy off. And I'm just going to, well, you know what? I'm going to make a big deal about this. Here's Seaver in his White Sox uniform, 1985. Barry Bonds, I'm going to come back to him in a second. And there's Phil Niekro, who in many respects became like the early win of my generation. That is, they had to go to all different teams to kind of amass all of his victories to get the 300. And of course, any baseball fan knows that Niekro accomplishes that. He gets his 300th win, I believe, with the Yankees. And I think we were talking about this before, that he wins 318. I believe he did it with the Yankees. 11, I'm just doing the numbers right now. 11, 18. Yeah, he did it with the Yankees, almost like on the last day of the season. Niekro, I'm just going to give you this. Niekro was amazing to me because even though his baseball reference is 14-12 with a 3.35 ERA, not bad for a knuckleballer. And we've gone over the fact that he really toiled for some crummy Brave teams. I mean, they weren't even exciting as being lousy teams. They were just boring, crummy teams in the late 70s, early 80s. But at least he did get to another playoff series with Atlanta in 1982. Incidentally, in 82, if people remember, Torre becomes their manager. They win the first 13 games of the season, set a record, and then they kind of limped their way in. I think they finished with 87 wins and lose to the Cardinals. Here's the interesting thing. Negro started that game 1 against the Cardinals, and the game was called, and the Braves were ahead. And, of course, Negro doesn't pitch again, and it would be interesting to see what would have happened with that game, because there was, I believe, a rain delay, and it caused all kinds of problems. And the only reason I said it is because Negro in 1982 was 17-4, led the league legitimately in winning percentage, 810 winning percentage. Basically, he's 13 games above 500. That 13 is also what I believe the Braves finished that season. I think they were 87. Yep, they were 89-73, so they finished 16 games over. They would never have won the division without Negro having that stellar of a season, because he's coming back from the year before, the strike-shortened season of 81, 7-7. And then in 83, kind of goes back to what Phil Negro we kind of know. 11-10. He kind of averaged 14-12, according to Baseball Reference, over 162 seasons. Still, 11-10 is 524 winning percentage. And the thing is that Negro finished his career with a 537 winning percentage. I think that if you take a look at all those Braves teams in those late 70s and stuff, many of them were under 500. So he exceeded his team's performance, which is why he's a Hall of Famer. But he won 21 games, led the league in wins in 1979 with 21. He also led the league in losses with 20. Always a good sign. Interestingly enough, he started 44 games that year, and he completed 23 in 1979. Pretty amazing guy. But in 1979, he throws 6 wild pitches and sets the record for most in one inning. Here's another guy I want to get to before I talk about J.R. Richard. Joel Youngblood, I didn't mention him in This Week in Baseball History, but he remains to this day. Now, you're talking about 1982. So you're talking, again, almost 40 years ago. It's actually 40 seasons ago. Joel Youngblood remains the first and only player to ever be traded and get 2 hits, or hits for 2 different teams on the day he's traded. He played for the Mets, played in an afternoon game against the Phillies, got a base hit, then was traded, of course. This is a great baseball card. He gets traded to Montreal and gets a base hit that night. Just right off the plane, and gets a base hit. So he got 2 hits in the night for 2 different teams, thus setting a major league record. And I got to be honest with you, Youngblood didn't have the best of his career. You know, he played for those terrible Met teams of the late 70s, early 80s, did come over in the trade from the Reds. Never really, I think maybe the Mets expected more. He's kind of a player that would have been pretty good had he played for a winning club and come off the bench and played, let's say, spot starts here and there. Maybe give him 60 games a year, but give him about, 40 starts playing in an array of, because he was pretty versatile that way. I think he played third, first. I even think he played second, and, of course, all the outfield positions. So you're talking about a guy that can play like 5-6 positions. And I think he was also the Mets' way emergency catcher, just in case John Stearns hurt himself, Alex Trevino hurt himself. The third, who I can't recall, maybe it was Ron Hodges at the time, maybe he gets hurt, and so they had to go to him as the emergency fill-in catcher. But I think it was Youngblood on those early teams. Now, underneath him is where we're going with this. This is Vic Rasky. All right? I didn't get any baseball cards on him, but I just wanted to go over this and say to my viewers out there, and this is why I'm kind of perplexed sometimes with the WAR. Now, he had a career winning percentage of .667. He was 132 and 66. He's 66 games over 500. He played 10 years in the league. He wound up his career with Kansas City, the A's, in 1955, and he had one decision with the St. Louis Cardinals. He was 8-10 overall with St. Louis in 1954 and 55. So the Yankees knew when to get rid of him, obviously. Did he benefit from playing for the Yankees? Absolutely. But let's talk about this. When you're on a winning team, and if you're just a component of that team, if I were to say to you, okay, we have this guy, he's not the ace, he's not Whitey Ford, he's not Allie Reynolds, right? He's not Ron Guidry, he's not Catfish Hunter coming over from the A's. He's probably our third starter. How many wins? What would be his winning percentage and all the rest of it? And you probably say, well, probably in the best scenario, we're hoping, and this is the Yankees now, 8 teams in the league, they're at their monster best during the late 40s, early 50s. You would figure that this guy would go about 17-10 each year. All right? Really good. Maybe 14-12, 16-11, 17-10. You'd say, you know what? Maybe he even hints at winning 20 one year with some luck, but with that 20 wins, maybe he goes like 20-12. But here's what Raschke did. He starts off 46-47 at age 27 and 28, so he gets a late start, probably due in part to World War II. Nevertheless, in those 2 years, he had 16 starts and went 9-2. Now, his ERA is highly inflated, but that comes in context. He does end his career with a 3.72 ERA. But I was doing some investigating. His lowest ERA in his career was 2.78 with the 52 Yankees, and that was one of 4 All-Star teams that he makes that year. He does make the All-Star squad that year. But after 7-2 in 48, when the Yankees don't win the pennant, he goes 19-8, 3.84 ERA. He pitched 220 innings, doubled what he gave the year before. In 1949, he goes 29-10, and now you're talking about a guy who's got 40 wins and 58 decisions. His winning percentage is about, 685, just doing the math. And he pitched 274 innings and completed in that year 21 games. And in those 2 years, 48 and 49, he had 9 shutouts combined. Then he does it again. He basically duplicates in 1951 when the Yankees win the World Series. And, of course, they won in 1950 as well, and in 1949 as well. He won 21 against 10 setbacks, had a 3.27 ERA, not bad. And I'm going to tell you why that's not bad. He had 34-game start, led the league again. He had 164 strikeouts to lead the league, and he pitched 258 innings. So you're talking about a horse of a starter. He's a horse. And followed up 52, goes 16-6. Again, almost, it's amazing. He goes 704, 677, 724 to lead the league in winning percentage, 677, 727. And then his final good year with the Yankees, 13-6, 3.33 ERA. That year, he pitched for the first time under 200 innings, 181 in 5 years. So you are talking, but even in 13-6, he still finished 7 games. He had 7 complete games and 4 shutouts with a save. Now, I understand the WAR. It's wins above replacement. But let me ask you something. If he's like your third starter or your second starter, find me another starter, even at that time. And you're talking about Feller, Lemon, Whitey Ford. Maybe we throw out Whitey Ford because he had, but find me another guy that had not just a winning percentage of 600, but a winning percentage of over 675. And even higher than that for those 5 years. That's incredible. All right. And not only that, in the World Series, guess what his winning percentage is? It is 625. He won 5 games in the World Series in 8 decisions. And his ERA was 2.24. And of course, guess what? The Yankees won every World Series he's in. And I just naturally assumed, I have to be very honest with you, I naturally assumed that Raschke probably made the Hall of Fame some way, somehow. I mean, leaving out a guy with a 667 winning percentage, 132 wins. Now, I get it. He kind of had a shortened career. You can attribute that to the war. He got a late start and all the rest of it, but he gave 10 years. Yes, his greatest years were with the great Yankee teams. I get all that. But it wasn't like the Yankees had every guy, every pitcher on their staff winning at a 650 clip. It's just incredible to me. And there are sometimes guys that really benefit from playing for a great team. Maybe Ratsky did that. But to be at a 650, 670 winning percentage, he's got to have some pretty good stuff. And the manager has to have pretty good confidence in him to give him so many innings. Yes, the game was different. By the way, his 3.72 ERA was compiled during an era in baseball, the 1950s, where the runs per game, take a look at this. The runs per game were over 4 for each year. Now, why do I say that? Because outside the 1930s, and I did a show on this earlier about how I'm anti-DH and that really the DH, that it hasn't really improved the scoring as everybody thinks. Yes, it's had some ups and downs, but as I pointed out, baseball has had some ups and downs by decades. The 1930s still remains the greatest offensive decade in the history of baseball. Just take a look at the number of runs per game scored there. Now, the 1950s were right up there. Yes, now hear me out. In 1950, when Ratsky had a 4 ERA, the runs per game average for the American League was over 5 runs per game. So he's 1 run less than league average. Very much so like what we had maybe 20 years ago when there was an upsurge in offense in both the National and the American League, tons of home runs, tons of offense, and you were looking around and you couldn't find guys' ERAs under 350 or 340. I mean, today, let's face it, we live in an age right now, mind you, this year, it seems to be like an age of the pitcher again. And almost seems like maybe 1968 with an asterisk all over again this year. But last, let's say 10 years and stuff, if you found, a pitching staff that was comprised of guys with, let's say, 2 or 3 guys or 4 guys that had an ERA under 3.5, you were doing something. You had a pretty good pitching staff there. Okay? So in 1950, I went through the list. It goes down in the 60s. Actually, 1965, they were averaging, let's say, about 4.2 runs a game. All right. And then, boom, the wall hits. And then it's under 4 for the next few years, with maybe the exception of 1969. Okay. Ratsky did a pretty good job. And to have only a 16.6, it's just, again, I'm just amazed at that. I don't think it was the tomato can. And I'll tell you what, I bet you if you ask the Red Sox or any of the competitors, even the Indians who had Lemon, and like I said, and Bob Feller during the 50s, and other guys on that staff Mike Garcia, I do believe, they take him in a heartbeat. Can you imagine him on that Indian pitching staff? Now, you can argue this. Well, age 34, he goes to St. Louis in a trade and goes 8-9 with a 4.73 ERA. I get it. But he might have also been, out of gas in his tank. He might have just let it all out with those 4, 5, 6 years with the Yankees and just gave them everything. Like I said, if this guy is your third starter and he's giving you that kind of production, he's doing a whale of a job for you. I'm sorry. He's a heck of a pitcher. All right. So I've had my Ratsky. I will say this. I got to give a tribute to, Mickey Mantle, who is dead now. 15, over 30 years now this week. August 13th, I think he died in 1985. And instead of just getting one picture of Mickey Mantle. Now, look, Mantle and the Yankees, not my favorite players. Was Mantle a great player? Absolutely. And I know I'm going to get people who are going to say Mantle or Mays. I'm going with Mays. But they'll probably say, well, Mantle got hurt all those years. Okay. But Mantle played on better teams overall than Mays did. All right. So I would say this. Many of the players who played with both players, Mantle and Mays, would probably give the nod to Willie Mays. And of course, this picture in the middle on the top, that remains the iconic picture of Mickey Mantle. In fact, I thought I had that card years ago. It turned out to be a fake. Thank God I didn't invest a heck of a lot of money in it. I'm not saying I spent a lot for it. It just, but it turned out to be a fake. And so I didn't part with my money. This one I kind of remember the most, and that's the bottom one in the middle, the Mantle one. I think that might be from 68. But Mickey Mantle hit a pinch hit home run, and of course, him hitting pinch hit home runs, think about it. Probably his most famous is the 64 World Series, where he hit one off Barney Schultz. I think it was pinch hit. Probably not. But always with, well, my whole point with Mantle is always with, that was the romance of Mantle. And that's something that he had probably over all over his peers and even over Mays and Aaron and Williams, was that this guy was 1950s. He embodied the 1950s. Okay? Mickey Mantle. And then we, of course, here's another guy. I want to talk about Johnny Briggs. I was looking at Johnny Briggs and Greg Maddux. I was looking at Maddux the other day. Maddux is a testimony to what I'm talking about. He won over 300 games, and it's amazing that everyone thinks that Maddux just played with, like, you think of him just playing with the Cubs and Atlanta. But he went back to the Cubs, and I forgot that he had a stop in L.A. and with San Diego. He actually did this. In 2006, he was with Chicago and L.A. and won 15 games. Then he goes to San Diego and wins 14 games. His ERA is 4.14. Then in 2008, he goes from San Diego to the Dodgers and finishes 8-13. He wins 355 games and 227 losses. He's got a .610 winning percentage. And I was really hoping that he would stick around. He was 42. Obviously, he was spent. It would have been interesting had he been able to get those 45 wins to get to 400 wins. The interesting thing is, and this is why you have to be kind of guarded too with and Baseball Reference, I love it, but they base everything on 162 game average. And basically, he's 16-10 every year, according to Baseball Average. Now, look, when you think about him, you think about him more as being this year 19-9, not 16-10, or 16-6. It was amazing. I was floored about this, but again, this is in context. Maddux only has 2 20-game seasons. He did it back-to-back. In his walk year with Chicago, he was 20-11. And then his first year with Atlanta, he goes 20-10. His ERA in both those years comes out to average about 2.24, 2.26, because he had a 2.18 and a 2.27, excuse me. He had a 2.18, and then he goes to Atlanta and leads with a 2.36 ERA. And then the next 2 years, he's phenomenal with the ERA, yet he doesn't win 20 games. He goes 16-6 in 94, but preface that, that's a strike-shortened season. And he has an ERA of 1.56. It would have been interesting to see what he would have done, because that was August. You would figure there was like maybe might have had another 8 starts that year. And probably he goes 5-3. He probably goes 21-9, maybe 22-8 that year. The next year, 95, he goes 19-2 with a 1.63 ERA. Arguably, he only pitched 200 innings that year, though. Arguably, and it's probably his best season, probably his favorite season because the Atlanta Braves win the World Series. It's the only one that he's on, the only World Series championship he's on, as a matter of fact. But he went 19-2 with a 905 winning percentage to lead the league. And he had 10 complete games, 3 shutouts. One thing, and here's why I say you have to put things in context. Now, he led the league in shutouts 5 times. But if you threw these stats back, let's say 40 years ago, or even or even 60 years ago, right? He led the league 4 times with 3 shutouts. I mean, there were times that, let's say, the great pitchers. I mean, I'm even thinking Gibson in '68. I mean, I don't even think he he probably led the league that year, but he had like 9 or 12 or 10 shutouts that year. It was actually incredible. Actually, as I'm going to segue to J.R. Richard, remind me of his last 2 seasons in the big leagues and the number of shutouts he's involved in, and you'll understand what I mean about in context. So this was where baseball, 2 things. Shutouts require you to complete the game, and they're not doing that as much anymore. Actually, that's a real rarity. And it started back in the 90s, okay? Even sooner than that. That's one reason why he led the league with only 3 shutouts. Number 2 is that there was an offensive explosion during his career, and that's what made it phenomenal. Him and Pedro having ERAs not just under 3, but under 2, and not just under 2, but significantly under 2. I mean, the 1.56 ERA comes with 25 starts in '94, and the 1.63 ERA in '95 comes with 28 starts. And again, remember, '95, it starts kind of late that season. So they're not playing a full 162 games, I do believe. Let me just check just to make sure, because I don't want to pass along information. They only played 144 games. So you're talking about 16-5. You're talking about maybe 3 more starts he would have gotten. Because remember, we've gone to the 5-man rotation. And when I was a kid, wow, it was not uncommon for guys who were the ace of the staff getting 40 starts a year because you're going with a 4-man rotation. Now, probably with the 5-man rotation, you're lucky to get maybe 35 starts if you're really lucky as the ace of the staff. And believe me, you play 10 years and now you're missing in the prime of your career, let's say 5 starts each year. That's 10 seasons, that's 50 starts. And if you're averaging 16 wins a season, that's one season. That's 35 starts is one season. That's another 16 wins that you might have on your final statistical grade book or marking, report card. Anyway, that's Greg Maddux. Of course, known for painting the black. I will tell you this. Johnny Briggs, I have to put him in. No, he's not a Hall of Famer. But he is a local guy, I do believe. He's from Paterson, New Jersey. He went to Seton Hall University, according to Baseball Reference, so that's a shout-out there. I did not realize that until I was doing some investigating on him. He had some productive years. 1971 was probably one of his finest for Milwaukee. He was traded by the Phillies to Milwaukee. That was a heck of a deal, by the way, for Milwaukee. They got Briggs. They got Don Money. They got a couple other guys. Money would go on to have a couple of decent seasons for the Milwaukee Brewers. In fact, I think he made an all-star team, Don Money. Anyway, he hit 21 homers, 59 RBIs in 1971, 264 batting average. And then 1972, he did almost the exact same thing. He was 21, 65, and 266 as a batting average. I mean, that's pretty amazing. That's what I'm talking about. And I guarantee, and here's the interesting thing. The following year, he only hit 246 at age 29, 18 homers, 57 RBIs. He drew a ton of walks that year, 87. He had a 361 on-base percentage, although it wasn't as high as the 1971 season. He had 378. But ready for this? He finished 23rd in the MVP voting in 1973 for the Brewers. Now, they would really come out of their shell about 1977. I just want to show you this, though. Briggs had a 3.2 WAR. Okay? Here's why I say that. Carlton Fisk, catcher that year for the Boston Red Sox, had 26 homers, 71 RBIs. He had 7 stolen bases as a catcher. Only drew 37 walks. So he had a 309 on-base percentage. I know that would improve. But ready for this, he is the catcher on the Red Sox. His WAR was only 3.9. You would figure it might be a little higher since he is a catcher, and it's about wins above replacement. Find a catcher that gives you 26.71. To that extent, ready for this? I'm just looking at some of these guys. Amos Otis, who finished 3rd in the voting that year, 26.93, 13 steals, 63 walks, 300 even batting average. His WAR was 4.0, and he played center field. Now, Johnny Briggs was never a center fielder. He was never a middle of the infield player. I think he probably played first and left field, and not too well. I mean, mediocre at best. All right? But nevertheless, he had one of his best seasons, yet the 2 seasons that were far superior, he doesn't get an MVP. But in 1973, he gets the MVP, 23rd in the voting. Amazing. And, of course, here's Rod Carew. Enough said about it. Well, there's not enough. Well, I'll even pick this out. A-Rod up here, I got him in the Yankee uniform. It is amazing. He hit his 500th home run and his 600th home run on the same day. That's incredible. That's really bizarre. It's really weird. Rod Carew, this has got to be one of my favorite baseball cards. I just love it because I do like the Twins lettering. I like the solid blue baseball hat for the Twins. They have a little logo over there with the Twins. This is a 1970 card. Obviously, that's in Yankee Stadium. And I believe that the card is was photographed in 1969, probably the tail end. So they probably have that, that Major League Baseball logo that they had in 1969, which I wish they would bring back. Why not just have the logo on all the time? It's a nice logo. It's a cool logo. The only reason I don't want it to come back is that when you see cards or you see pictures, you can identify as 1969 because that was the logo. Now, there are people who thought it was Harmon Killebrew, Ted Williams. I was always told it was Pete Rose. The more I look at it, I could see it being Harmon Killebrew. The more you look at it, you can see Ted Williams. So those are the 3 guys. I do believe the official thing is that it was modeled after Harmon Killebrew. All right? That Major League Baseball logo. And, of course, Rod Carew had the big fight with the Twins, gets him sent to the California Angels where he has, his 3,000 hit. Ironically, he gets it against the Minnesota Twins, the team he started with. I believe in 1969, he's also famous for this. I think he stole home base 7 times. When have you seen even a stolen once or twice in his season today? Amazing. Now, here's the guy I want to talk about, J.R. Richard. When I was looking at his stats, he is incredible, guys. He's 107 and 71 lifetime. Here's the deal with him. I broke down his stats, did all his wins over the season. I can't understand this. He came up, I was floored when I saw this. He came up as a 21-year-old in 1971. And in his first 4 years, 21, 22, 23, and 24, from 1971 to 74, he actually won 11 games against 6 setbacks. Now, his ERA was a little high, but he showed promise. And then finally the Astros give him a shot. In 1975, he goes 12 and 10. By the way, I saw this the other day and I had to investigate it. In his very first start, he faced San Francisco. He actually beat them 5 straight times. It was unbelievable. I think if you take a list, and I do have the list, and of course I don't have it in front of me right now, but he beat San Francisco like 5 straight times. And it seemed like this. The Astros didn't give him the ace status until like his last 3 years in the league. So he was really facing the third star, much like Raschke. And the thing is, he probably had better stuff than Raschke. How do I know that? Ready for this? In his first game, his first strikeout victim was Willie Mays. In that game, he struck out Mays not once, not twice, but 3 times before finally walking to say, "Hey, kid." Now, in 1979 and 1980, his last year, ready for this? He went a stretch where he had a phenomenal stretch. Now he goes 10-4. He went 15-5 over his last 20 decisions. In those 20 decisions, he was involved in 9 shutouts. He won 8 of them. His ERA was like a paltry 2. I think he ended his career, ready for this, with a 1.9 ERA, but that was carried over from 1979. He was phenomenal. He did lead the league in ERA in 1979, 2.71. This is a guy who won 20 games at the age of 26, 20 games, and then he had 3 consecutive 18-win seasons. This guy was headed for glory. The tragedy is that his career was cut short. And now we are just reminiscing about the what could have been career of J.R. Richards instead of extolling a Hall of Fame one. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History. Thank you again for joining me as we pay tribute to J.R. Richards, one of the great Houston Astro pitchers.